Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is TVP World. You're watching World News Tonight. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee. An alleged act of Russian sabotage in the Baltic Sea has damaged undersea power and telecom cables. How will NATO respond to this provocation? More on that in just a moment, but first, tonight's headlines. Poland steps up to power Ukraine as Slovakia pulls back. The U.S. pledges nearly $6 billion in new military aid to Ukraine. America mourns its oldest former president. Jimmy Carter passes away at 100. Finnish police have discovered drag marks stretching for dozens of kilometers on the Baltic Sea floor in the Gulf of Finland. These marks, allegedly caused by a Russian oil tanker, coincide with damage to a power line and 4 telecommunication cables. Could this suspected Russian sabotage lead to a firm NATO response? Malik Steele has the details.
Eagle S, an old tanker registered in the Cook Islands, damaged the S-Link 2 power cable connecting Estonia and Finland on Christmas Day. But this wasn't a regular tanker. This was one of Russia's Shadow Fleet vessels, which allows Russia to evade Western sanctions. This time, it was used for a different purpose.
Eagle S, Cook Island registered tanker carried spying equipment. Is not surprised. Russia has been active in spying that region.
The ship was seized by the Finnish border guard. Maritime publication Lloyd's List reported that high-tech devices for recording radio frequencies were brought on board the vessel in suitcases and operated by the crew, after speaking to a source who had provided services to the Eagle S.
They were monitoring all NATO naval ships and aircraft.
Authorities believe that the vessel had dragged its anchor for dozens of kilometers, damaging not only the power cable, but other telecoms links as well. The damage inflicted on the S-Link 2 has reduced its cross-border capacity from more than 1,000 to 650 megawatts. If the Eagle S had damaged the other S-Link 1 power cable connecting Estonia and Finland, Tallinn could have experienced a severe energy crisis.
The winter is coming. Basically, the winter is just right now in the eastern NATO countries. So Russia knows exactly that some of the countries are suffering the lack of electricity.
The incident happened just weeks before Estonia is planning to disconnect its energy from the Russian grid. The damage did not influence these plans, Tallinn has said.
This is an act of war by Russia. Not if it was just by itself, that's one thing, but there has been so many of these incidents that have happened. This is not incompetence or an accident. This is a deliberate attempt by Russia to destroy infrastructure between 2 NATO allies. So until we start treating it like that, they're going to continue doing this.
Estonia and Finland have several defensive tools at their disposal, including 2 articles of the North Atlantic Treaty.
The parties will consult together whenever, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. The parties agreed that an armed attack against one or more of them in Europe or North America shall be considered an attack against them all.
The question now is how Estonia and Finland are going to treat the Eagle S incident if it's confirmed that this was a deliberate act of sabotage. But proving this could be difficult.
This type of, let's say, accident, it's not a typical example of the military attack.
NATO's Secretary General said the alliance would enhance its military presence in the Baltic Sea. Estonia has already launched a naval operation to protect the S-Link 1 undersea power cable and is holding drills to better prepare for future sea threats.
Poland is reportedly prepared to increase its electricity exports to Ukraine if Slovakia cuts its power supply. Bloomberg broke the story, highlighting Poland's readiness to support its war-torn neighbor. Sonia Agata-Biszczan reports.
The recent Bloomberg report, quoting an anonymous senior official, indicates that Poland may boost electricity exports to Ukraine should Slovakia reduce its supply. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Slovakia accounts for approximately 19% of Ukraine's electricity imports. This raises the question, does Poland have the capacity to step up?
in normal market situation, we could increase the production in Poland if there's a market to sell, not to send without any price, and electricity to Ukraine. It could be a way for a win-win scenario for both parties.
According to Jakubik, the process would focus on increasing energy generation, such as from coal power plants, to send more electricity to Ukraine when possible. This announcement of Poland stepping in is the latest news surrounding Ukraine's energy transit. A number of earlier developments were rooted in political retaliation. Notably, Ukraine has announced that it will not extend its gas transit agreement with Russia after it expires at the end of 2024.
If a European country is ready to receive gas and not pay this money to Russia until the end of the war, we can think about it. This is an important moment for us.
Slovakian Prime Minister Robert Fico, who recently visited Russian President Vladimir Putin, voiced disappointment about Zelensky's decision to halt gas transit through Ukraine after the two had an exchange in Brussels.
After January 1st, we will consider the situation and the possibility of reciprocal measures against Ukraine. If it is unavoidable, we will stop the supply of electricity, which Ukraine urgently needs, in the event of grid failures.
Zelensky asserted that Fico's actions driven by Putin's directives are opening a second energy front against Ukraine, to the detriment of Slovakia's interests.
Fico's short-sighted policy has already deprived the Slovak people of compensation for losing Russian gas transit. It now risks depriving the Slovaks of another $200 million per year, which Ukraine pays for the imported electricity.
Ukraine's power grid is connected to several neighboring countries. Aside from Slovakia, they include Poland and Romania, both of which play an important role in ensuring a stable electricity supply.
The link between Ukraine and Slovakia has a capacity of around 260 megawatts, while the link between Poland and Ukraine has twice that, 550 megawatts, meaning that theoretically the flow of energy from Slovakia could be replaced by that from Poland.
The Ukrainian government is collaborating with its EU neighbors to maintain the necessary electricity supply volumes.
Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stated that Moscow is dissatisfied with the terms proposed by U.S. President-elect Donald Trump for peace in Ukraine. The leaked plan reportedly includes delaying Ukraine's NATO membership for 20 years and deploying peacekeeping forces from the UK and Europe to the region. Francis Akbilis reports.
Prior to being re-elected as the US president, Donald Trump talked a big game about ending the war in Ukraine within 24 hours of getting the job.
I will work out peace as president-elect. If I win this election, the first thing I'm going to do is call up Zelensky and call up President Putin, and I'm going to say, you got to make a deal. This is crazy.
Now, less than a month before being sworn in, however, Trump's plan for peace in Ukraine seems to be less foolproof than he originally anticipated. That plan, according to leaks published in the Time magazine, includes postponing Ukraine's NATO accession by 20 years and deploying UK and European forces to Ukraine for peacekeeping. In an interview for TASS, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov outright rejected Trump's supposed plan for a truce.
I really hope that Mr. Trump's administration, including Mr. Kellogg, will delve into the root causes of the conflict, and we are always ready for consultations, ready once again to confirm our position, if anyone does not understand it.
That position includes two main points the Kremlin has hailed as the reasons for invading Ukraine in 2022: NATO's eastward expansion and the so-called denazification of Ukraine's government. The latter has been on the lips of Russian officials since the night of the invasion, saying they want to protect the Russian minority living in Ukraine.
Our policy is based on freedom. Freedom for everybody to determine their future and the future of their children. And we consider it important that all people living in today's Ukraine can exercise this right, the right to choose, all of those who will want it.
While the Kremlin said it won't accept the terms presented so far, it did say it would be open to further negotiations with the incoming Trump administration. However, if talks continue to stall due to disagreements, Donald Trump might have trouble keeping his election promise.
The United States has announced an aid package totaling $5.9 billion in military and financial assistance to Ukraine. These funds are anticipated to be the final U.S. aid package to Kyiv under the Biden administration. Our Ukraine correspondent Oskar joins us from Kyiv with the latest developments.
It has been a big day for Ukraine with regards to aid packages coming from the United States as the Biden administration finalizes the last of its U.S. military support packages for Ukraine. Now, the White House announced on Monday a $2.5 billion US aid package, security, military assistance, with the White House saying that it provided both immediate and long-term military support for Ukraine, including air defense systems and artillery. This comes as the US Secretary for the Treasury, Janet Yellen, has also announced a further $3.4 billion US in aid package for Ukraine for budget aid. That's to help with government services. Now, this wasn't the only assistance also announced today. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal also announced a further $15 billion US that have been promised to Ukraine that will be coming from revenues frozen from Russian assets. Now, according to Prime Minister Shmyhal, that has been agreed between the World Bank and the Ukrainian Finance Ministry. So a big day all round as Ukraine gets the last of the aid packages from the Biden administration, with a lot of uncertainty still hanging in the air as what kind of support and assistance, if any, will be coming from the Trump administration going forward. It's Oskar reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Poland's National Electoral Commission has officially approved the financial report of the Law and Justice Party for the 2023 parliamentary elections. The approval follows a decision by the Supreme Court clearing the way for the ruling party to recover millions of euros that have been withheld amid disputes over their financial documentation. Jeremy Hołudniuk reports with more details.
In August, the National Electoral Commission determined that Law and Justice had illegally financed parts of its campaign for both chambers of parliament. The Commission demanded that Law and Justice Party returns millions of euros to the state budget and its subsidy was slashed.
The Law and Justice effort to use public funds to finance its election went beyond the pale, so it's no surprise that they must now suffer the consequences. However, as I said, the Commission is an entirely independent body, and it is the Commission that makes the decisions here, not politicians. The process is far from politicized.
In mid-December, the Supreme Court's Office of Special Control and Public Affairs, whose efforts have been criticized by European tribunals due to its politicization by Law and Justice, upheld the party's appeal against the National Electoral Commission's rejections of the financial report. Now, the Commission, in accordance with the ruling, has accepted the report breaking down the party's election campaign spending.
It doesn't mean that the money will flow, and I'm curious myself, how will the application to the finance minister look like? The work is ongoing.
The outcome now hinges on the decision of Finance Minister Andrzej Domański. Despite the court's ruling, Domański has consistently said that he considers the Commission's decisions to be binding. If he maintains this stance, it will clear the way for the release of the funds to Law and Justice.
Tributes and condolences are flooding in worldwide following the death of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter. His single term in office coincided with a period of significant socio-economic challenges, both domestically and globally. Our reporter Gabriela Fresnek reports.
The death of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter dominated newspaper front pages on Monday across the United States and the globe.
I'd like to announce that I am a candidate for president.
An outpouring of sympathy flowed across Polish social media spaces, with many political figures stressing Carter's role in speeding up the political transformation in the Soviet bloc.
I was deeply saddened by the news of the 39th President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, passing away. Carter was a remarkable man and leader who, as a president, supported solidarity in 1980 in our struggle for liberty and democracy. Jimmy Carter, a man of ironclad principle, brought Poland and the United States closer together. His commitment to supporting democracy and human rights inspired the freedom aspirations of the Polish people.
While Carter's overall presidential legacy is perceived as a mixed bag of disasters and major achievements, his policy towards the Soviet bloc stands out as the latter.
Carter's impact was huge. He was the first to break away from the tradition of respecting the Soviet sphere of influence in Eastern Europe and in Poland. Together with Zbigniew Brzezinski, they laid the groundwork for the erosion of the Eastern Bloc and the uncoupling of communist states from Moscow.
Carter, closely guided by his foreign policy advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski, elevated the issue of human rights to a key policy driver and reshaped the discourse in US-Soviet bloc relations.
Zbigniew Brzezinski opened Carter's eyes to the Soviet bloc countries' capacity for internal reform and rejecting communism.
Good afternoon. Dzień dobry.
Brzezinski played a key role in organizing Carter's 1977 trip to Poland. Although only 2 days long, the visit was of paramount importance. Carter was the first of the Western leaders to convince the Polish Communist Party to broadcast his speech in real time.
Jimmy Carter is a very important figure to Poland, as he imposed sanctions on the Soviet Union following its invasion of Afghanistan. Years later, these sanctions helped bring about the collapse of the Soviet Empire, leading to Poland finally regaining its sovereignty. The Carter administration also lent its support to the Workers' Defense Committee, without which there would have been no solidarity.
After his term in office ended, Carter devoted himself to charity work and various diplomatic initiatives, including founding the non-profit Carter Center, focused on human rights, in 1982. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2002, in recognition of his efforts to find peaceful solutions to international conflicts and to advance democracy and human rights.
In 2024, the global tourism industry has rebounded from the COVID-19 pandemic. Emerging trends are transforming travel, offering fresh opportunities and destinations for adventurers. Natalia Komarov has more.
Nature, nurture, culture. Let's talk about travel. 2024 was the year global tourism finally returned to its pre-pandemic levels, and in some places it even exceeded them. According to the UN's World Tourism Barometer, 141% more tourists arrived in Qatar this year than in 2019. Two other destinations that have been attracting more and more visitors recently are Albania, with 77% growth, and Saudi Arabia with 61%.
Japan, for example, is very popular. Maybe because it was closed so long time that the people postponed the holidays and now they just coming back.
Japan reported a huge 59% growth in tourism-based revenue compared to 2019. Other countries which have experienced double-digit increases in receipts are Serbia, Pakistan, and Romania. Our advice is visit before they become too expensive. And what do people look for when they travel today?
They're looking for something much more personalized. They do the tailor-made trips, which means, let's say there is two families, they want to go together. They don't want other people in that group. So we sit with them, we talk about the itinerary, and we just prepare the program right for them. So yeah, this market is growing a lot. I would say we got like 40% of tailor-made trips right now.
The need for personalization has even created a new type of job, individual travel planner.
I plan trips day by day. So all the attractions that my clients will be taking part in. What is different about the way I do business is that I am not a travel agent, so I do not book individual services for my clients' trips. My client has a much more room to change their trip while they're traveling and adjust the trip to their liking.
There is also a new phenomenon, the coolcation.
We choose countries with milder climates. This season, Scandinavia was all the rage. Finns and Norwegians made campaigns to promote their region.
We love it. This is a fjord. We took a ferry and yeah, we just love it.
Super beautiful.
We'll have to come again.
So that we can get here from the other side. We came here to escape the heat, basically.
People want to cool off and cool down from digital overstimulation. More and more often, travelers choose destinations off the beaten track that allow them to disconnect from the hectic modern world.
Recent discoveries in the Baltic Sea have escalated concerns about Russia's hybrid warfare tactics. Finnish investigators identified drag marks linked to a suspected Russia-connected vessel following significant damage to undersea power and data cables. These incidents raise urgent questions about the limits of provocation and NATO's readiness to respond. Joining us today on TVP World to unpack the military and strategic stakes is Ben Hodges, the former commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you for the privilege.
So can you help us understand how significant is the damage to the Baltic Sea cable from a strategic and security level?
Well, the significance of the damage is not that great. It can be repaired. What is significant is that it has been damaged as part of a continuing series of actions by Russian vessels that are not clearly identified as Russian Navy, but there's no doubt that this is Russian-directed, Russian-related activity. And it's being done in such a way that causes damage to lots of our communications and energy infrastructure. But this is what Russia does. Until they get punched in the nose, until we make them stop, they will continue doing this. And it only gets worse until we act.
And would you mark this incident as a clear escalation in Russia's hybrid attack against NATO allies?
Actually, I don't like the use of the word hybrid because it kind of puts it in sort of a squishy category. You know, the Russians don't think, hey, we're going to do a hybrid thing or we're going to do a real thing or we're not or whatever. They're always at war. It just depends on what they're trying to achieve, what part of the spectrum of capability they use. So until we get in the same mindset and treat what they do as acts of war, and then get the right policies in place, get the right laws in place, and have tangible, painful repercussions for the Russians, they're going to continue doing this. You know, instead, what we get are, oh, we're very concerned, or we need to examine this. You know, the Finns got it right. They went out and seized this ship, and that's what we all need to be doing.
Right, and I think you aptly pointed out that perhaps the term hybrid is sort of the West's response kind of to try to somehow not escalate the tensions, but perhaps Russia's already taking this as consideration as a different mindset. Where do you think NATO should start drawing the line between provocations and blatantly active war?
I think we should do exactly what Finland did. We should make it clear to the Russians that anytime there's an accident like this, we are going to impound the vessel that was involved. And we should be doing the same thing with these ships, the so-called shadow fleet that's carrying illegal oil out through the Baltic Sea. Denmark has talked about perhaps stopping ships, checking them for the insurance, checking them for compliance with the sanctions. These are the kind of actions that we should be doing. And these are all completely within the international law. That's what we should be doing. And quit worrying all the time what Russia might do if we enforce the law. They should be worried about what we're doing instead of us always worrying about what they're doing. There's nothing they can do to escalate. They're not going to use a nuclear weapon over this. They're going to threaten, they're going to complain. But at the end of the day, you see that Finland, the newest member of NATO, is the first one that really went out and did something. This is where I think all of our allies in the Baltic Sea, including Poland, need to be much more forceful in protecting infrastructure, enforcing international law, and don't allow Russia to get away with what they've been doing.
All right, I think I see the situation as Russia keep provoking these Western nations and poking and getting into our faces. But like I mentioned, until someone actually punches them in the face, well, they're just stopping just short of this outright, aggressive action. So at what point do you think the leaders from the Baltic countries will actually make that decision to send a stronger message and say that, okay, this is enough?
I hope they're doing it right now. I saw today that the Latvian prime minister, I think, has talked about seizing ships that do things like this in Latvian waters. Denmark has talked about increasing their efforts to stop Russian the Shadow Fleet vessels. Finland has already taken a step. So I think nations realize that Russia really can't do anything about it. And so we should not be scared that they might somehow escalate something if we impound one of their ships and hold it for an investigation. I mean, do it that way until they stop destroying infrastructure. And we need to think about these incidents not as random, where somebody says, hey, let's go try the destroyer cable thing. These are all designed to weaken our ability to monitor what's going on, to communicate with each other. And it would be part of a long-term preparation if they were ever going to attack a NATO country or do something else in the region, then destroying our communications infrastructure or our power generation or our energy infrastructure. These are the kind of things that they would do.
Would you go as far as categorize these Russian Shadow Fleet to be treated as military threats rather than just commercial entities at this point?
Well, the reason they're important is because this is how Russia pays for its war against Ukraine and everything else that it's doing. This is the only income Russia really has is from the sale of this oil that goes to India and China and a few other countries, including some European countries. So if you stop the sale, their ability to export illegally in violation of sanctions, if you stop that, that has a dramatic impact. It's even more important than providing ammunition to Ukraine is choking Russia's ability to generate money to pay for ammunition that it gets from North Korea and Iran and China. So this is exactly what we should have done this 2 years ago, is cut off their ability to export oil and gas to China and India.
And coming back to the NATO's response, do you think if NATO fails to kind of take a forceful action to what just happened, it might embolden further Russian aggression?
Of course. I mean, they must laugh at us sometimes when we wring our hands and have huge debates about, oh my God, what should we do? And then they just, plan the next operation. So I think that we have got to understand what it is they're doing. These are acts of war. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to go launch missiles. It doesn't require that at all. We can use the same means that they're using, except we would be the ones enforcing the law. We would be the ones acting in accordance with the law of the seas. We would be the ones acting in accordance with international law, enforcing sanctions. So I don't know why we continue to be so scared. Now, it could be there are some nations, whether it's inside the European Union or inside the alliance, that will be embarrassed because they will be exposed as countries that are also importing Russian oil and gas or have some other arrangements, and it'll probably be a little bit embarrassing. So if nothing else, at least countries in the Baltic region, for example, could work together to protect critical infrastructure and enforce sanctions.
All right. Recently, there's a lot of talks about the war in Ukraine eventually winding down and peace negotiations going on. But do you think that these sort of attack will stop just because the war in Ukraine ended? Or do you fear that Western nations might be a little bit complacent for having closed this chapter and could have kind of like put it behind their minds?
Yeah, Russia only stops doing this when they get stopped. Of course, they'll continue to do this because they know that traditionally the West, we lose interest, we turn it back. Oh, thank God we have a peace treaty now, or we have a ceasefire. Now we can focus on something else. They know that we don't stay focused on these things. And so they'll just wait a little while and pick it back up. I have to say, though, while I'm uncertain about what the Trump administration actually plans to do in Ukraine, there have been a lot of mixed signals out there. I'm not so sure they're going to just turn their back on Ukraine as I thought a few months ago. But I think the Ukrainians know that there is no way they should sign any kind of or they should accept any kind of negotiated outcome where they have to give up land or where there's not a security guarantee, because the Russians have never, ever respected any of these kind of agreements unless there was a strong force that compelled them to. The Ukrainians know that. And so I think shame on us that we have not done everything that we could to help Ukraine win. It's in our interest. This is not charity for Ukraine. This is in our strategic interest. And I think we are going to rue the day that we allowed Russia to continue doing what it's doing now while we still have a chance to actually help Ukraine defeat Russia.
Right, and I think by the actions that Russians are doing right now probably reflects what you're talking about. In the meantime, thank you so much for breaking all of this down for us. I really appreciate your input and insight. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you for the privilege.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World News Tonight. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.